For 3 hours, they'd been trying to discredit her testimony in the Washington D.C. federal court. Just another senior citizen with failing memory, they said, until she spoke 2 words that made classified files unseal automatically and triggered emergency protocols that hadn't been used since the Reagan administration. Welcome to the human stories. Before we begin this powerful story of hidden truth, suppressed testimony, and the moment when secrets refuse to stay buried, tell us in the comments where you're watching from today, and if you believe stories like this need to be told, hit that subscribe button and help us make sure they are. The Barrett Prettyman Federal Courthouse stood imposing on Constitution Avenue Northwest in Washington, D.C., its neoclassical columns and marble facade representing the weight of federal justice in the nation's capital. On the 7th floor, Courtroom 18 hosted what appeared to be a routine contempt hearing in the ongoing case of Meridian Defense Contractors v. Thomson Electronics, a complex dispute over defense contracts from the 1980s that had been grinding through federal court for 18 months. Dr. Margaret Chen sat in the witness chair, her silver hair neatly arranged and her navy blue dress, conveying the respectability expected of someone testifying in federal court at 73 years old. She had the careful posture of someone who understood the gravity of legal proceedings, but also the steady bearing of someone who had faced more intimidating situations than a courtroom filled with lawyers. Judge Robert Kellerman presided from the bench with the imperious manner of someone who had spent 22 years in federal service and developed an intolerance for anything that complicated his docket. At 58, he was known throughout the D.C. federal court system for running efficient proceedings and showing little patience for witnesses who strayed from direct answers to direct questions. The contempt hearing had been called because Dr. Chen's testimony the previous week had included references to classified government programs that, according to the prosecution, she had no business knowing about and certainly no authority to discuss in open court. Dr. Chen, said Assistant U.S. Attorney David Morrison, a sharp-featured man in his 40s whose reputation for aggressive prosecution had earned him assignments to sensitive cases involving government contractors, you've been called here today because your previous testimony included claims about classified defense programs, claims that we have reason to believe are fabrications designed to support your client's position in this contract dispute. Dr. Chen looked at him with the calm attention of someone accustomed to being questioned by people who doubted her credibility. I testified truthfully about my knowledge of defense contracts from my time in government service, she replied evenly. Your time in government service, Morrison repeated with barely concealed skepticism, according to your employment records, consisted of 3 years as a technical advisor to the Department of Energy. From 1983 to 1986, hardly the kind of position that would give you access to the classified programs you claim to have knowledge of. Defense attorney Sarah Martinez, representing Thomson Electronics, rose from her table. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is arguing rather than questioning. Sustained, Judge Kellerman said curtly. Mr. Morrison, ask questions. Morrison approached the witness stand with the calculated aggression of a prosecutor who sensed weakness. Dr. Chen, isn't it true that you're simply fabricating these claims about classified programs to help your client avoid paying contractual obligations? No, Dr. Chen said simply. Isn't it true that you've never had security clearance above the basic level required for Department of Energy technical advisors? That's not accurate. Morrison turned to address the courtroom as much as the witness. Dr. Chen, we've reviewed your employment records, your security clearance history, your personnel files. There is absolutely nothing in your documented background that would give you access to the kind of classified information you claim to possess. Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment, then replied, Mr. Morrison, some positions don't appear in standard personnel files. The prosecutor's expression sharpened. Are you claiming you held secret positions that left no documentation? That's quite convenient, isn't it? I'm stating a fact about how certain government positions are documented. Judge Kellerman intervened with the tone of someone reaching the end of his patience. Dr. Chen, this court operates on evidence, not unsupported claims. If you cannot provide documentation for these alleged positions and clearances, then your testimony about classified programs is inadmissible speculation. Your Honor, Sarah Martinez stood again. My client has submitted a motion requesting that the court review classified materials that may support Dr. Chen's testimony. Motion denied. Kellerman replied immediately. This court will not engage in fishing expeditions through classified files based on the uncorroborated claims of a witness whose credibility is already in question. Morrison pressed his advantage. Dr. Chen, let me be direct. You're making up these stories about classified programs because you think it will help your client's case. You've never had access to classified defense programs. You've never held security clearances beyond basic levels, and you've never been involved in anything more sensitive than reviewing technical specifications for solar panel installations. Dr. Chen's expression remained composed, but something subtle shifted in her posture, a straightening that suggested Morrison had finally touched a nerve. Furthermore, Morrison continued, your claims about these alleged programs are so vague and general that they could apply to any number of legitimate defense contracts. You haven't provided a single specific detail that couldn't be found in publicly available sources. Mr. Morrison, Dr. Chen said quietly, I've been deliberately vague because the specifics remain classified. How convenient. And I suppose you'll claim that proving your credibility would require revealing state secrets. In some cases, yes. Morrison turned to Judge Kellerman. Your Honor, this is exactly the kind of circular reasoning that makes this witness's testimony worthless. She makes extraordinary claims, then says she can't provide evidence because it's classified. She asserts knowledge of programs she can't prove exist, then hides behind national security when challenged. Judge Kellerman nodded approvingly. Dr. Chen, this court finds your testimony lacks credibility and foundation. Your claims about classified programs are unsupported by documentation and appear to be fabricated to support your client's position. Dr. Chen remained silent. Therefore, the judge continued, this court orders you to limit your testimony to matters for which you can provide documented evidence. Any further references to alleged classified programs will be considered contempt of court. Your Honor. Sarah Martinez rose urgently. Dr. Chen's knowledge is material to our client's defense. These contracts, Ms. Martinez, Judge Kellerman cut her off. Your client's defense cannot be based on the fantasies of a witness who claims secret knowledge. She cannot prove. This court operates on evidence, not conspiracy theories. The dismissive tone finally pushed Dr. Chen past the point of passive acceptance. Your Honor, she said, her voice carrying a different quality than the mild courtesy she'd shown throughout the hearing. I understand your skepticism, but there are protocols for handling classified testimony in federal court. Protocols that don't appear to be known by this court. Judge Kellerman's expression darkened. Dr. Chen, are you suggesting this court doesn't understand federal evidence procedures? I'm suggesting that some procedures are rarely used because the circumstances requiring them rarely arise. Morrison saw an opportunity. Your Honor, the witness is now claiming special knowledge of court procedures as well as classified programs. This appears to be a pattern of fabrication. Dr. Chen looked directly at Judge Kellerman. Your Honor, before you hold me in contempt, I request that this court review the classified evidence protocols outlined in Executive Order 12356, Section 4.1, Subsection C. The courtroom fell silent. Even Morrison looked uncertain. Executive Order 12356 dealt with classified information handling at the highest levels of government. Judge Kellerman's voice carried a warning. Dr. Chen, I'm going to ask you one final time. Do you have any documented Evidence to support your claims about classified programs. Dr. Chen considered her options. For 3 hours, she had tried to testify within the bounds of what could be discussed in open court, but the prosecution's attacks on her credibility and the judge's dismissive attitude had made it clear that half-truths and careful omissions would not be sufficient. She leaned forward toward the microphone and spoke 2 words that changed everything. Operation Nightingale. The words left Dr. Chen's lips with quiet precision, but they hit the federal courtroom like an electromagnetic pulse. The effect was immediate and dramatic. In the gallery, 3 men in dark suits, who had been taking notes, suddenly stopped writing and reached simultaneously for their cell phones. A woman near the back of the courtroom stood up abruptly and headed for the exit with urgent purpose. Court security officers who had been maintaining relaxed positions around the room subtly shifted to higher alert. Judge Kellerman frowned, clearly not understanding the significance of what had just been said, but recognizing that something fundamental had changed in his courtroom. "Dr. Chen," he said, his voice carrying a warning, "I don't know what game you think you're playing." But he was interrupted by the bailiff approaching the bench with obvious urgency. The bailiff whispered something in the judge's ear that made Kellerman's expression shift from annoyance to confusion to something approaching alarm. Assistant U.S. Attorney Morrison stood at his table, clearly as confused as the judge, but sensing that his case was suddenly spinning beyond his control. "Your Honor," he said, "whatever the witness thinks she's accomplished by mentioning some random operation name." Morrison was interrupted by the courtroom's main doors opening. A man in a gray suit entered and walked directly toward the bench with the purposeful stride of federal authority. He was followed by 2 other individuals, whose bearing immediately marked them as government officials of significant rank. The lead man approached the bench and spoke quietly to Judge Kellerman, displaying credentials that the judge examined with growing bewilderment. Dr. Chen remained seated in the witness chair, her hands folded in her lap, waiting with the patient calm of someone who had initiated a process and was now watching it unfold exactly as she had expected. The conversation between the federal officials and Judge Kellerman lasted several minutes, conducted in whispers that carried enough urgency to make clear that this was no routine interruption. Finally, Judge Kellerman addressed the courtroom with a voice that had lost all of its earlier confidence. "This court will recess for 1 hour, while certain matters are reviewed." He banged his gavel with unusual force and departed for his chambers, followed immediately by the federal officials who had taken control of the situation. Morrison approached Sarah Martinez during the recess. "What the hell just happened? Who is your witness?" Martinez looked as confused as the prosecutor. "Margaret Chen, retired technical consultant. At least, that's what I thought." Both attorneys turned to look at Dr. Chen, who remained seated calmly in the witness chair, as if nothing unusual had occurred. Morrison decided on a direct approach. He walked over to Dr. Chen. "Ma'am, I think we need to understand what just happened here." Dr. Chen looked at him with mild curiosity. "You challenged my credibility, Mr. Morrison. I provided verification by mentioning some operation name, by mentioning a specific classified program that I had direct involvement with from 1984 to 1991, a program that would explain why my security clearances don't appear in standard personnel files and why my government service record appears to be limited to basic technical consulting." Morrison felt a growing unease. What kind of program? The kind that doesn't officially exist, but leaves electronic signatures when certain keywords are spoken in monitored environments like federal courtrooms. The prosecutor stared at her. "You're saying that mentioning this operation name triggered some kind of automatic alert?" "I'm saying that certain classification levels have protocols attached to them. Protocols designed to protect information that remains sensitive even decades after operations conclude." During the hour-long recess, activity throughout the federal courthouse intensified dramatically. Additional security personnel appeared in corridors. Men and women in dark suits moved through the building with obvious purpose. Elevators that normally served all floors suddenly required special access cards. In Judge Kellerman's chambers, a conference call was underway with participants whose identities would never appear in court records. The judge, accustomed to being the ultimate authority in his courtroom, found himself taking direction from people whose titles he wasn't authorized to know. When court reconvened, the atmosphere was completely different. Judge Kellerman returned to the bench with the careful demeanor of someone who had just learned that his understanding of the case before him was fundamentally incomplete. Additional federal officials now occupied the front rows of the gallery. A new court reporter had replaced the regular stenographer. Most significantly, a secure communication device had been installed near the witness stand. Dr. Chen, Judge Kellerman began, his earlier dismissive tone replaced by careful formality. This court has been informed that your testimony may involve matters of national security that require special handling. Yes, Your Honor, Dr. Chen replied. I tried to explain that earlier. Morrison rose from his table. Your Honor, I object to whatever irregular procedure, Mr. Morrison. The judge cut him off. Your objection is noted and overruled. This court will proceed according to classified evidence protocols as directed by federal security authorities. A man in a navy suit approached the witness stand and addressed Dr. Chen directly. Ma'am, I'm Deputy Director Harrison from the National Security Agency. Before you continue your testimony, I need to verify your identity and authorization to discuss Operation Nightingale. Dr. Chen nodded and provided him with a card that she produced from her purse. Harrison examined it carefully, then spoke briefly into a secure phone. After receiving whatever confirmation he needed, he turned back to the court. Your Honor, Dr. Margaret Chen is authorized to provide testimony regarding classified programs under controlled conditions. However, portions of her testimony will need to be conducted in closed session. Judge Kellerman looked like a man whose comfortable routine had been completely disrupted by forces beyond his understanding or control. Very well, Dr. Chen, please continue your testimony, but limit yourself to information that can be discussed in open court. Dr. Chen adjusted the microphone slightly and began to speak with the measured precision of someone trained in handling sensitive information. From 1984 to 1991, I served as the primary technical analyst for Operation Nightingale, a classified program designed to identify and prevent the theft of advanced weapons technology by foreign intelligence services. The program was administered jointly by the CIA, NSA, and Defense Intelligence Agency. Morrison tried again. Your Honor, even if this witness did have some involvement with classified programs, that doesn't validate her claims about the specific contracts. Mr. Morrison, Deputy Director Harrison, interrupted. Dr. Chen's involvement with Operation Nightingale included direct oversight of the exact defense contracts that are the subject of this litigation. Her testimony is not only relevant, it's definitive. The federal courtroom had transformed into something more resembling a classified briefing room than a typical civil proceeding. Additional NSA personnel had positioned themselves throughout the gallery. Court security had been supplemented by federal agents. And Judge Kellerman found himself presiding over a hearing that was rapidly moving beyond his normal jurisdiction. Dr. Margaret Chen remained composed in the witness chair, but her entire demeanor had shifted from that of an elderly consultant to someone comfortable operating at the highest levels of government secrecy. Dr. Chen, Deputy Director Harrison continued, please explain to the court the nature of your involvement with Operation Nightingale. Operation Nightingale was established in response to intelligence indicating that Soviet and Chinese agents were systematically targeting American defense contractors to acquire advanced weapons technology. My role was to embed within the defense contractor community and identify security vulnerabilities in their operations. Assistant U.S. Attorney Morrison remained standing, though his earlier confidence had evaporated. Your Honor, even accepting that this witness had some involvement with classified programs. Her claims about the specific contracts in this case, Mr. Morrison, Dr. Chen interrupted. The contracts between Meridian Defense and Thomson Electronics that form the basis of this litigation were specifically created as part of Operation Nightingale. They were designed to appear as legitimate defense contracts, while actually serving as counterintelligence operations. The statement hit the courtroom like a thunderbolt. Sarah Martinez, representing Thomson Electronics, looked stunned. Morrison appeared to be struggling with the implications of what he'd just heard. Judge Kellerman leaned forward. Dr. Chen, are you stating that the contracts in question were not actual business agreements, but intelligence operations? That's correct, Your Honor. Thomson Electronics was unknowingly used as a front to identify foreign agents attempting to acquire advanced radar technology. The contracts they signed with Meridian Defense included deliberate technical specifications that would reveal any attempt to transfer the confirmation to unauthorized parties. Harrison consulted notes on a classified tablet. Dr. Chen, are you authorized to discuss the specific technical aspects of these operations? The technical specifications themselves remain classified, but the fact that these contracts were created for counterintelligence purposes, rather than legitimate business purposes, is now declassified as of Executive Order 14,019, signed 8 months ago. Morrison finally found his voice. Your Honor, if these contracts were intelligence operations, then Thomson Electronics has been pursuing litigation against a government program rather than a legitimate business dispute. That's correct, Dr. Chen confirmed. Thomson Electronics was never intended to receive the technology specified in their contracts. The contracts were designed to identify which of their employees might be susceptible to foreign recruitment. Sarah Martinez stood slowly, the full implications becoming clear. Dr. Chen, are you saying that my client has spent 18 months and hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees pursuing a case against what was essentially a classified government operation? Yes, and I apologize for not being able to explain this earlier. Until Executive Order 14,019 declassified certain aspects of Operation Nightingale, I was prohibited from discussing even the existence of the program. Judge Kellerman rubbed his temples, clearly struggling with the unprecedented nature of the situation he was facing. Dr. Chen, this court needs to understand the full scope of what you're revealing. Are you stating that this entire litigation is based on contracts that were never intended to be fulfilled? Your Honor, Thomson Electronics entered into those contracts in good faith. They had no knowledge that they were part of a counterintelligence operation. But yes, the contracts were designed from the beginning to be unfulfillable, because their true purpose was intelligence gathering, not technology transfer. Harrison spoke again. Your Honor, Dr. Chen's testimony is accurate. The NSA can confirm that Operation Nightingale did utilize fabricated defense contracts as cover for counterintelligence activities. The specific contracts in this litigation were part of that program. Morrison looked like a man whose entire case had just collapsed beneath him. Your Honor, if the government was operating a classified program using fraudulent contracts, then the United States government is liable for damages to Thomson Electronics, not Meridian Defense. Mr. Morrison, Harrison replied. That determination would be made through appropriate federal channels, not in this court. But you're correct that the nature of the liability has changed substantially. Dr. Chen continued her explanation. Operation Nightingale successfully identified 17 foreign agents attempting to acquire U.S. defense technology between 1984 and 1991. The program was considered one of the most successful counterintelligence operations of the Cold War period. Judge Kellerman struggled to regain control of his courtroom. Dr. Chen, why didn't you reveal this information during your initial testimony last week? Your Honor, I tried to indicate that the contracts in question involved classified programs. Both the court and the prosecution dismissed my testimony as fabrication. It was only when my credibility was directly challenged that I was forced to invoke specific program details. Sarah Martinez approached the witness stand. Dr. Chen, what does this mean for my client's case? It means that Thomson Electronics has a legitimate claim against the United States government for damages resulting from their unknowing participation in a classified operation. It also means that Meridian Defense was acting as a government contractor rather than a private entity in this matter. Morrison made one final attempt to salvage the prosecution's position. Your Honor, even accepting this witness's claims, the government's position remains that Thomson Electronics failed to fulfill their contractual obligations. Mr. Morrison, Dr. Chen replied, Thomson Electronics couldn't fulfill contracts that were designed to be unfulfillable. The technical specifications they were asked to provide were deliberately impossible to meet, because the true purpose was to identify anyone who claimed they could meet them. Harrison stood and addressed the court formally. Your Honor, based on Dr. Chen's testimony and subsequent review of classified materials, the National Security Agency recommends that this litigation be transferred to the appropriate federal venue for cases involving classified government operations. Judge Kellerman nodded slowly, recognizing that his authority in this matter had reached its limits. This court accepts the NSA's recommendation. This case will be transferred to the Federal Court of Claims for resolution under classified evidence procedures. He turned to Dr. Chen. Dr. Chen, this court apologizes for questioning your credibility. Your testimony has revealed matters of significant national importance that were not apparent from the available evidence. Dr. Chen accepted the apology with grace. Thank you, Your Honor. I understand that classified programs create situations that are difficult to navigate within normal legal procedures. As the formal hearing concluded and the courtroom began to empty, Morrison approached Dr. Chen. Ma'am, I have to ask, how many other cases like this are there? How many civil disputes might actually involve classified programs that we don't know about? Dr. Chen considered the question carefully. Mr. Morrison, the Cold War generated numerous operations that used civilian covers. Some of those operations are still classified. Some will never be declassified, and some, like Operation Nightingale, become declassified only when circumstances require it. She gathered her papers and prepared to leave. The important thing to remember is that the people and companies used as covers weren't enemies of the United States. They were unknowing patriots who served their country without ever knowing it. The Thomson Electronics v. Meridian Defense case was ultimately settled through the Federal Court of Claims, with Thomson Electronics receiving full compensation for their legal costs and financial losses resulting from their unknowing participation in Operation Nightingale. Dr. Margaret Chen returned to her quiet retirement, though word of her testimony spread through certain circles of the intelligence community. She had reminded everyone that the Cold War had been fought not just by soldiers and spies, but by ordinary Americans who unknowingly played crucial roles in protecting national security. Judge Kellerman, meanwhile, received additional training in classified evidence procedures, training he had never expected to need in his federal courtroom. Assistant U.S. Attorney Morrison found himself reassigned to cases involving more conventional defense contractors. Though he never forgot the lesson about making assumptions regarding witnesses whose backgrounds he didn't fully understand. At the human stories, we believe that truth has a way of surfacing when circumstances require it, even when that truth has been buried under decades of classification and secrecy. Sometimes the most important stories are the ones that can't be told until history is ready to hear them. Dr. Margaret Chen had spent 30 years keeping silent about her service to her country. But when her credibility was challenged and her testimony dismissed, she proved that some secrets are worth protecting until protecting them no longer serves the greater good. Tell us in the comments, have you ever discovered that someone you underestimated had an extraordinary hidden background? What did you learn from that experience? And from what city are you watching this story unfold? Subscribe to the Human Stories For more tales about the hidden heroes among us, the classified sacrifices we never see, and the reminder that truth has a way of emerging when justice demands it. We'll see you in the next story. And remember, that quiet person giving testimony might have spent their life protecting secrets that shape the world we live in today.